Hi guys, how are you all today morning? Good morning. Today is 7th September 2023. Sorry, today is 8th September 2023. My name is TSV Raghavan and I live in Chennai, Tamil Nadu, India. This is my spiritual vlog on YouTube. Hardan, 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 Hari Bol, TRSV, Nectar, NECTAR, Nectar. In this particular blog, in all my previous videos, we have been discussing about the knowledge and information that we have gleaned through the study of spiritual books, scriptures, contemplation on the material universe, and meditation on the spiritual universe. This particular video in this vlog is no exception to that rule. In fact, it is a mere continuation of all that we have been doing in my previous videos. Kindly subscribe to my vlog and press the bell icon so that I may keep reminding you of all my previous and future videos. So let us continue with the topic of discussion for today's video in this vlog. We have been discussing in detail about the connection between the three subtle bodies of a human living entity with the Kundalini serpent and its chakras on the spinal cord of a human living entity's gross body. We all know that this Kundalini serpent is a reservoir of unlimited energy, and the chakras are stations through which it passes while slithering into the vein or tunnel in the spinal cord from the base of the human living entity to the cranium of the human living entity. We also know that the Kundalini serpent of dormant energy and the resultant or the chakras in the spinal cord are both not only imaginary but also subtle in form. They are as subtle as the three subtle bodies of a human living entity. So, we must remember this while analyzing this. We must also take into account the three modes of material nature which occupy the psyche of every human living entity. These three modes of material nature are the mode of goodness, the mode of passion, and the mode of ignorance. Furthermore, we should also take into account what is known as the false ego of the human living entity. There are major three types of ego. The first is called false ego. False ego is when a particular human living entity identifies himself or herself with these four layers of material body that entrap the spirit soul that he or she was or is originally the real identity. The second is known as the actual ego. In that case, the same human living entity identifies himself or herself as that raw, unevolved spirit soul. He or she realizes that he or she is not this set of material bodies, but he or she is actually that spirit soul. The third ego is known as superego. In the superego, the same human living entity realizes that he or she is neither that set of material bodies nor the raw, unevolved spirit soul, but actually he or she is only a part and parcel of the spirit whole. It is from the spirit whole that this human living entity got ejected knowingly or unknowingly, deliberately or otherwise, by design or by default, into the space, and that resulted in the spirit spark that got ejected out of the spirit hole, becoming a spirit soul when it came in touch with the material world, and later on became a living entity when it was entrapped with four layers of material body by this unpardoning material world. These things we must keep in mind while understanding what we are going to discuss now. Here we are trying to discuss the relationship between the three subtle bodies, namely the causal body of intelligence and logic, the astral body of mind, feelings, and emotions, the etheric body of senses, being five in number, that are sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch, and the fourth gross body, which has that imaginary, subtle Kundalini reservoir of unlimited energy, and the seven chakras that are placed at equal distance between the spinal cord of the same human living entity. We have already divided the first six chakras into pairs of two. There are three pairs in number. The seventh Sahasrara chakra is a continuation from the causal body of intelligence into the actual spirit soul. Hence, it is not being taken into account for the time being. In my yesterday's video, we talked about the first base root chakra known as Mooladhara chakra and its relationship along with its mode of material nature and false ego with the three subtle bodies and their vibrations that are getting continuously transmitted into the brain of the gross body. Today we will talk about the second chakra, Swadhisthana chakra. The first Mooladhara and the second Swadhisthana chakra are a pair in themselves which form the basis for the seven Kundalini chakras of a human living entity. Furthermore, while Mooladhara chakra was situated just behind the anus of the human living entity, the Swadhisthana chakra is situated behind the genitals of the same human living entity, just below the umbilical cord and above where the Mooladhara chakra is situated. While this Mooladhara chakra or root chakra is initially activated by performing what is known as Hatha Yoga, this Swadhisthana chakra is activated by performing a yoga called Tantra Yoga. We all know that the Kundalini serpent awoke on being attacked by the performance of Hatha Yoga and then got activated and began slithering through the tunnel of the spinal cord and came to rest at the first chakra called Mooladhara. However, a living entity may decide to perform the Tantra Yoga, in which case the same Kundalini serpent begins to slither upwards through the tunnel and comes to rest at the Swadhisthana chakra. There are five basic elements which make the four subtle bodies of a human living entity. These five are known as ether, air, fire, water, and earth. Of these, earth formed the basis for the Mooladhara or root chakra. That is precisely the reason why a person who was happy with the activation of the Mooladhara chakra concentrated only on the physical aspect of life and on his or her gross body. The second chakra is known as Swadhisthana chakra, and the element that connects with this Swadhisthana chakra and regulates and monitors this Swadhisthana chakra is called water. Swadhisthana means delicious or palatable, something which makes a living entity happy. When a living entity realizes utmost pleasure and happiness while doing anything, he or she has a chemical called dopamine being released from the brain of that particular living entity. This pleasurable act may be anything like sex, orgasm, eating delicious food, drinking delicious beverages, drugs, bodybuilding, sports, adrenaline and testosterone based sports and activities, or some favorite hobby or job which gives job satisfaction to that particular living entity. Hence, Swadhisthana is more mental than physical, unlike the Mooladhara chakra. In Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna has talked about five evils that plague every human living entity. These five are known as kama or lust, krodha or anger, lobha or greed, moha or illusion, and ahankara, that is ego. Of these, the first, lust, and the second, a little bit of greed, will form part of this Swadhisthana chakra. Lust plays a very important role in the Swadhisthana chakra. When a human living entity is attracted towards some object or work, the first thing that happens to him or her is that person's psyche is imprisoned with lust. Whether you are doing weightlifting, bodybuilding, indulging in athletics, sports, or painting, or sculpting, or music, or any such hobby, or eating delicious food, or consuming delicious palatable drinks, or you are having an orgasm through your sex. Everything is directly or indirectly based on this lust alone. This lust and the physical aspects of the Mooladhara chakra are both directly connected to the third subtle body of etheric senses. Both the physical aspect of Mooladhara chakra and the deliciousness or happiness felt through the Swadhisthana chakra are sensuous in nature, and hence they are directly connected to the etheric body of senses. Here, what happens is there are five senses in number, as I have already mentioned. These five senses get an outlet through the human living entity into the material world through his or her sense organs in the gross body. In other words, this gross body is merely a static instrument of the three subtle bodies of the same human living entity. These sense organs are as follows: two eyes for sight, two ears for hearing, two nostrils for smell, one tongue for taste, and the complete skin and genital for touch. We will all appreciate that we generally, on an average, prefer to use our senses and our own sense organs to live and enjoy life in this material world. There seldom is someone, howsoever evolved he or she may be, who at one time or the other did not use these senses or the sense organs to experience that pleasure which makes the chemical called dopamine get extracted from the brain of a human living entity. Unabashedly, one must accept that this pleasure seeking of a human living entity is actually based on his or her Swadhisthana chakra. This Swadhisthana chakra, as has been mentioned before, is connected to a yoga called Tantra Yoga. Now we will try to connect the three subtle bodies, the false ego, and the three modes of material nature with the Kundalini chakra of Swadhisthana. We all know by now that when the Swadhisthana chakra is activated, this Kundalini serpent, which was hitherto resting at the Mooladhara chakra, wakes up again, slithers through the tunnel in the spinal cord, and comes to rest at the Swadhisthana chakra. Now, we all know that vibrations from the three subtle bodies of etheric senses, astral mind of feelings and emotions, and the causal intelligence of logic are transmitted continuously to the brain of the same living entity right from the moment he or she is born till the time when he or she passes on. Transmissions are continuous, but the choice of vibrations from each subtle body depends on the destiny, the karma, the intelligence, the maturity, the age, the taste, preferences, and other such factors of a human living entity. We will all appreciate that what looks very tasty or palatable to us all in our infancy, babyhood, childhood, etc., are not so palatable when we reach adulthood or middle age. The same that attracted vibrations at the adulthood or middle age are not so delicious or palatable when we reach the old age. Even in one human living entity, choice and preferences for vibrations from the three subtle bodies vary according to the age of that human living entity. This is because of the experiences, maturity, and knowledge plus evolvement of the same human living entities. Toys which looked so attractive at childhood are not so attractive to an adult. The opposite sex, which was so attractive to the adult human living entity, are not so attractive to someone in the middle or the old age, and so on. Priorities of a human living entity differ or change according to these factors, especially knowledge, experience, maturity, and evolvement along with age. Now, we will talk about the three modes of material nature. We already know their names. They are goodness, passion, and ignorance. Goodness mode is controlled by the vibrations of the causal body of intelligence and logic. Passion mode is controlled by the vibrations from the astral body of mind, feelings, and emotions, whereas the ignorance mode is directly controlled by the etheric body of senses. At any given time, of the 100% human living entities in the society in the material world, at least 80% are happy living with the vibrations of their senses. Only 15 to 20% are happy to listen to the vibrations from the astral body of mind. A minuscule 5 or lesser percent in number are interested in listening to the causal body of intelligence and logic. We will all appreciate that we ourselves have experienced or experiencing even now this particular factor. Though we may overlook or tend to overlook the vibrations from other bodies, we know in our subconscious memory that we are losing out at something. Now, when you are in the delicious Swadhisthana Chakra mood, the vibrations from the etheric body of senses look very palatable and attractive, and hence anything that we are attracted to becomes what is known as lust. Lust is plainly either physical or something which gives pleasure to the senses of a human living entity. However, when the same human living entity begins to listen to the astral body of mind, feelings, and emotions, then this same Swadhisthana chakra changes into platonic love from lust for the same object. What attracted a person before may now stop getting that much importance, and this person may genuinely fall in love with that particular object. This is particularly true when it comes to the attraction for the opposite sex. The initial attraction towards the opposite sex by any male or female entity is generally based on lust. It is only when the person stops listening to the vibrations from the etheric senses and begins to listen to the astral body, mind, feelings, and emotions, does this same lusty attraction turn into platonic love. But in very, very rare cases, which are limited to the 5% of humanity, the same lust or platonic love turns into total indifference when the same human living entity begins to listen to the causal body of intelligence and logic. As mentioned before, this is very, very rare. It happens to only one small bracket of humanity in this society. However, it is the supreme type of attraction. Relationship between the three subtle bodies with the Swadhisthana chakra have been explained here. However, other factors like the destiny, karma, intelligence, maturity, knowledge, plus the mode of material nature which this particular living entity belongs to, plus his or her false ego, play a large part in deciding upon which type of vibration from which subtle body this particular living entity and its brain masticate on, prefer, 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 masticate on, chew them, extract juice from them, and percolate that juice into the gross body of that particular living entity. Among the three modes of material nature, Swadhisthana chakra attracts only the ignorance mode or the passion mode, just like that from the Mooladhara chakra. Swadhisthana chakra and Mooladhara chakra look very attractive to people from the ignorance mode of material nature or passion mode of material nature. Very rarely does it happen that someone in the mode of goodness is attracted towards the Swadhisthana or Mooladhara chakra. This we must keep in mind before proceeding towards other chakras about which we will discuss in my next video. I would like to add here that every chakra is of parallel importance to a human living entity who wants to understand himself or herself to get ultimately self realized, then get liberated from this repeated chain of births and deaths in this material world, and finally get delivered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is all I wanted to talk about in this particular video. Kindly let me know what you think of my talk on this particular matter in this video. Please give me your own expert views, thoughts, and ideas so that I may blend everything together for the sake of this society. Before concluding, let me remind you that I am also a published author with Amazon Kindle and paperback. I write on spiritualism, fiction, and assorted subjects. Spiritualism happens to be my favorite subject. Till we meet in my next video, it is good morning from TSV Raghavan.